What is noise?
Artifacts created by your sensor.
Ooh, artifacts created by your sensor. Actually, artifacts is a really good word for that, guys. Guys, have you ever seen the damage that JPEG compression does? Around edges, you'll see this kind of like gibberish kind of speckly stuff. That's referred to as artifacting. Artifacting is something that's in an image that isn't supposed to be there. It wasn't in the original image, and yet there it is. So JPEG compression is artifacting, and noise technically is also an artifact, although I've never really heard anyone just jump out and say it's an artifact. But yes, it is. What causes it? Well, let's talk about how an image is created at all. You'll notice if you zoom in, yeah, we got some light pixels, we got some dark pixels, we got some light pixels, we got some dark pixels. For sure, some of them are image information. Like I'm noticing a distinct pattern going on here. So I'm thinking that these light and these dark are part of the image. But when we get into here, why is that one so dark compared to that one? If I was actually there looking at that scene, would that part of the arch be darker than that part? Maybe. But if you had photographed a plain white wall or a plain blue sky and zoomed in, you would also see this kind of speckliness in here. Let's talk about that randomness that occurs. What can make noise worse? Well, okay, let's say I was trying to photograph you guys right now, and I wanted to use like a 60th of a second and like f16. Would you guys be properly exposed? It'd be really dark, wouldn't you? But if I cranked up my ISO to like, 104,000 and you guys were jumping around, I could probably get a pretty good, not too much blur, probably pretty good depth of field. What would the image look like? Yeah, it would have a lot of noise in it. We say noise for digital images. Back in the days of film, we called it grain because it actually was the grains of silver halides that you were seeing. And if you had a higher ISO film, there were bigger chunks of grain. We call it noise. And there's actually a reason for that. How many people still have a record player? A few of you, okay. There's two parts to the system. You've got a turntable, and then you have an amplifier. And if you have the volume turned down on the turntable, and maybe you didn't notice, so to compensate, you cranked up the volume on the amplifier, what do you hear? Yeah, you hear this kind of random hissing in the background. Any electronic system has a little bit of randomness in the signal that's coming through. In the days of analog, it was just picking up cosmic rays, whatever. When you turn to a television channel that had no signal, you saw that psh, that noise. When my son was a little kid, he saw that one time, and after that, if there was like a TV that had like noise on it, he would just run right out of the room. It just freaked him right out. But it's looking for any kind of signal. It's trying to amplify it up to make something usable. With your digital cameras, when you turn up the ISO, we say that you're increasing the sensitivity of the sensor. You're not. What you're doing is turning up the amplification of your analog to digital converter. If you think about it, your sensor on your digital camera is it's like a solar panel, but it's actually like millions of tiny solar panels all connected together. When light falls onto a solar panel, well, what does it do? It generates an electric charge, right? Imagine you took, say, I had a 20 megapixel camera, 20 million little solar panels, and you shone light onto them. Each one is going to generate a signal, an electric charge. And there's a chip in your camera called the analog to digital converter that takes that analog electrical signal. Basically, it says, okay, I saw this much electric charge, this many photons hit this little square on your sensor. And it turns that into a number or a digit, hence digital photograph. If you start turning up the ISO, you're not making the sensor more sensitive, you're amplifying the signal that's coming off of that sensor. So in the case of, if I was photographing you guys outdoors, let's say we took all these tables and IMAX outdoors, it would be really bright. I could photograph you guys at like 100 ISO, even 50 ISO if my camera supported it. So that signal would be really strong. A lot of light would have to pour onto that sensor to make an image. Oh, nice strong signal. The noise beside it would be pretty small in comparison. But if we all came back into here and brought in the IMAX and stuff, because you can't leave them outside because it might rain, and then I turned up the ISO to like 16,000 or 104,000, whatever the camera is capable of, and I took a photograph again, well, that signal, the amount of light that's necessary to make an image would be much lower. But the noise would stay the same. The amount of noise in the system doesn't change. And when I amplify that signal, I'm also going to be amplifying that noise. So that's why we start getting all this noise in our images at higher ISOs. So the solution really is to pump more light onto your subject.